For centuries after the New Testament first spread across the Mediterranean world, Christian scribes copied its words line by line, preserving what they received and passing it on to the next generation. These scribes worked in flickering lamplight, in monasteries perched on cliffs, in quiet scriptoria nestled along the coastlines of Asia Minor, and in bustling centers of Greek-speaking culture. Their work was not uniform. It was human, shaped by devotion, diligence, and the limitations of sight and hand. But in the Greek East, in the lands that would become the Byzantine Empire, a particular tradition of the text grew, multiplied, and eventually overshadowed all others by sheer longevity and volume. In the centuries after Constantine, as Christianity expanded and the Greek-speaking world stabilized, countless copies of the New Testament were produced in the Byzantine Empire. These manuscripts were not all identical, but they showed a remarkable consistency. Their readings were smoother, their grammar more refined, their phrasing harmonized in areas, and their forms more standardized through liturgical use. A scribe in Constantinople might never meet a monk in Cappadocia, but their manuscripts often exhibited the same patterns, shaped by shared worship and common textual habits. By the medieval period, the Byzantine version of the New Testament had become the most widely copied Greek text in the world. Its manuscripts filled monasteries, churches, and libraries from the Balkans to Antioch. No one forced this uniformity. It developed naturally as the Church of the East copied scripture year after year. This large collection of manuscripts, more than any other textual group in existence, became known centuries later as the Byzantine majority tradition. It was not the earliest form of the text, but it was undeniably the most numerous. The Western world, however, did not fully grasp the scope of this tradition until much later. When Erasmus published his printed Greek New Testament in 1516, he had access only to a few late Byzantine manuscripts. Although influential, his text represented just a small part of the extensive Byzantine tradition, one group among thousands. The Textus Receptus that resulted from Erasmus was not the majority text. It was simply a printed version shaped by the few manuscripts he had. Behind those few manuscripts lay a vast ocean of witnesses Erasmus never encountered. As centuries passed and scholars started cataloging and comparing manuscripts, they uncovered patterns hidden beneath the surface of history, while early papyri found in Egypt revealed a text that was older and more diverse than anyone had imagined. Most surviving Greek manuscripts, over 85%, belonged to the Byzantine tradition. These manuscripts from the 5th to the 15th century resonated with a unified melody, though subtle variations whispered within the chorus. The question arose: if most manuscripts agree on a reading, does that majority voice carry weight in reconstructing the New Testament, as it was known to most Christians for over 1,000 years? In the late 20th century, two scholars, Zane Hodges and Arthur Farstad, chose to answer this question not through speculation, but by a method. Instead of relying on a few printed editions or on manuscripts selected for their antiquity, they proposed a simple principle. The reading supported by the majority of Greek manuscripts is the most likely to represent the dominant form of the text throughout history. They examined the extensive manuscript tradition, comparing thousands of readings and creating a Greek New Testament that reflected not the earliest manuscripts, but the prevailing readings of the Byzantine tradition overall. This work, published in 1982 as the Greek New Testament, according to the majority text, marked the first effort to reconstruct the Byzantine text statistically, rather than through the limited perspective of the TR. Others followed. Maurice Robinson and William Pierpont further refined the method, emphasizing the consistency, stability, and internal coherence of the Byzantine tradition. Their edition, published in 1991 and later revised, presented a majority text based on decades of comparison and analysis. This text was not identical to the Textus Receptus. While the TR reflected the editorial tendencies and limitations of Erasmus Stevens and Beza, the majority text represented the true manuscript consensus across centuries of Byzantine scribal culture. Unlike the critical text, the majority text does not claim to show the earliest possible version of the New Testament. Instead, it aims to represent the form of the text that the Church copied, read, preached, and preserved throughout the long history of medieval Greek Christianity. It depicts the New Testament as it existed for most Christians in the Byzantine and post-Byzantine worlds, a text shaped not by archaeology, but by living tradition. As modern translators and scholars examine the many forms of the Greek New Testament, the majority text serves as a reminder of the diverse voices that have carried Scripture throughout history. It is the text used by the churches that sang its words in ancient liturgies, preserved its readings in homilies and chants, and copied its pages by candlelight long after the empires around them rose and fell. The majority text reflects the rhythm of communal memory, less ancient than the earliest papyri, yet more widespread than any other textual tradition. Today, the majority text is used by some translators, pastors, and scholars who value its connection to the manuscripts that shaped Eastern Christianity for 1,000 years. Others prefer the critical text for its closeness to the earliest documentary evidence. Still, others remain loyal to the Textus Receptus for its historical significance in the Reformation. But the story of the majority text plays an important role in this landscape. It explains how the New Testament endured and thrived in the lived tradition of the Greek-speaking church, not through a single printed edition, but through the overwhelming testimony of countless manuscripts preserved by many hands. This is the story of a text not made by decree or recovered through excavation, but shaped by the steady, persistent efforts of generations who believed that copying Scripture was a sacred duty. It is the story of the New Testament as it resonated through the centuries, written, rewritten, read, and revered by a majority whose voices, preserved in ink and parchment, still speak today.